So I want to welcome everyone tonight to our second, so you're, oh my gosh, the name, running for local government. So you want to run for office, experiences in local government, that's this one. So to begin with, I just want to acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pay respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The city of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 7. So we appreciate that. Our speakers tonight, we have 2 speakers and then 3 members of our Q&A, hopefully 2 right now. So first we have Paul Fairie. Paul is a senior research associate and instructor at the University of Calgary. He has a PhD in political science and teaches continuing education courses on local politics. And we have Lisa Lambert again joining us. Oh, there's Julie. She's a political scientist and advocate for women in politics, as well as being a sessional instructor at the University of Lethbridge for 12 years. She has served 6 years with the Legislative Assembly of Alberta as the assistant to MLA Shannon Phillips. Lisa was born in Lethbridge and has raised her family here while pursuing her graduate studies at the Universities of Lethbridge and Calgary. So thank you to both of you for coming tonight. And our Q&A panel, we have Trevor Lewington, who is the mayor of Stirling. Lance Tailfeathers is a former Blood Tribe councillor, and we have just joining us, we have Julie Friesen. She's a councillor from the city of Medicine Hat. So welcome everyone, and I'll pass it off to Paul and Lisa to start our talk, and then we'll go to the Q&A panel after that, and Jonathan will lead the Q&A panel.
Sure, thanks so much. So I think I'll kick things off from a talking point of view. So I'm just joining you from, as you can see, my sort of home library here in Calgary. I'm actually just hiding the fact that there are mattresses right off to the side here, so I didn't want you to have to look at that for 20 minutes. So yeah, so as Bonnie said, my name is Paul Fairie. I, among many other things, teach some classes for continuing ed in civics, essentially, talking about local Alberta, federal and US politics, and it's always a pleasure to do anything for the library, because libraries are my favorite things in the world. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. There we go. Start. So to sort of kick us off, I just want to get us thinking a little bit about the idea of power, because I mean, if we think about politics and running for office, it is ultimately about acquiring and then hopefully judiciously using power. So I want to think about what power means for cities. So I'll talk about Alberta's Municipal Government Act here. So a big question that people often have, especially I think for city politics around Alberta really, is what municipalities actually do. So I mean, sometimes people have a pretty good image of some of what federal politics is, but not necessarily always. So it's important to actually get right sort of the powers that different levels of government actually have. I mean, if you've ever had the pleasure of looking through a local politician's Facebook page or Twitter, or any of the sort of social media, you'll see people asking local politicians for healthcare help, or provincial politicians with help with their passports, and it's like it can all be a kind of a complicated mess of a sort of who does what. So let's think a little bit about where power in cities is and what cities actually do. So I mean, one way of thinking about what cities do is to look at the budget. I mean, what's that saying about, you show me your budget and you reveal your priorities. So if you look at Lethbridge's operating budget for last year, about a third of it was fire and police, a third of it was transportation, transit, recreation and parks, and a third of it was everything else. So is it that Lethbridge has chosen these priorities just based on what people want, or is it really about something else? So obviously, essentially the answer is it's based on the powers that they have. So there's nothing so fun as actually looking at the Constitution. So I'm going to share here we're going to look at the Constitution together. I usually do this on Saturday mornings, which really wakes people up. But if you look at section 91 of the Constitution, I'm sure everyone's thinking, oh, it's my favorite section. But that's where you get the list of federal powers. So you get things like unemployment insurance, the postal service, the census is a federal power. Specifically, things about Sable Island are a power as well. So I mean, you can look through the list and you see the federal powers, and it comes from this document. If you go down to section 92 here, you can see the list of provincial powers. Saloons, for instance, are technically, I guess, a provincial power. There's my favorite word in the whole Constitution, I always like to point out, is eleemosynary. Bonus point if anyone can tell me what that means in your head. You can reward yourself a bonus point if you said it has to do with charities. But then you think, okay, well, section 91 is federal powers. Section 92 is all of these things around provincial powers. Where do municipalities come in? You're thinking section 93, but really that's just about education. So where are municipalities? You actually have to zoom in here a little bit. So let's do that. So in section 92, the list of provincial powers, subsection 8, you get this mention in the Constitution of municipal institutions in the province. So really what that says is city politics is a little bit different because it's not a sort of separate level of government in the same sense. So you have federal powers, provincial powers, and really city powers actually come out of the list of provincial powers. So in some ways, that like a nickname political scientists, it's never really caught on beyond that, have come up with for cities in Canada is creatures of the province. So really, when you think about what powers do cities have, essentially the answer is whatever powers the province has assigned to the cities. So how do they assign these powers? Every province has something along the lines of a Municipal Government Act, all called slightly different things. Alberta's is quite practically called the Municipal Government Act. So I'm not going to flip through the PDF here. You can look at that on your own time. It's 600 pages of fun that I do recommend if you're considering running for office to have at least a leaf through. But then you really want to think, what powers do cities have in this context? And it really means that cities almost have no real independent standing. They're restricted by section 92, which is about provincial powers. And it also means the federal government and cities don't really have a real mandated relationship. There's no real required interaction between the federal government and cities. The real action for cities is actually between the federal government and cities. And I see, I see in the chat, I am more than happy to provide these slides through the library, probably I would guess is the easiest way. And I did actually just say 600 pages of fun in the Municipal Government Act. So really, when you think about what powers cities have, in provincial politics, province actually has most of the kind of cards in the power battle in Alberta. If you think of in the last government, there was you can Google the Thorhild County business where some councillors were fired in a kind of complicated way, the most prominent example was in the late 90s here in Calgary. The school board governed under similar provisions was actually fired by the province. So really, the province really, I can't emphasize enough, has quite a lot of power over municipalities. But then the question comes up then is, what is actually in the Municipal Government Act? And as the 600-page length indicates, I'm not really going to go through everything that it covers, but just kind of give you a highlight and again point you to looking at the document. So the MGA, the Municipal Government Act, covers quite a bit and really more or less defines everything that cities are supposed to do, and in lots of ways how they're supposed to go about it. So again, it really covers the powers of cities, covers a lot of the rules around budgeting and taxes, what needs to be in the budget, how cities are allowed to raise and spend money. Lots of rules as well about how the mayor and council actually operate. So if you look inside the MGA, Part 2, Division 1, it's one of the early hits in the document, outlines sort of the areas that local councils can pass bylaws for municipal purposes, it says. And really, this is pretty much the whole list. There's a few sort of more procedural ones after this, but it's really the health, safety, and welfare of the people and the protection of people and property, people, activities, and things in, on, or near public places, or place that is open to the public, nuisances, including unsightly property, transport and transportation systems, businesses, business activities, and persons engaged in business, services provided by the municipality, public utilities, wild and domestic animals, and activities in relation to them. And that more or less sort of covers the broad scope of cities in Alberta and what they're mandated to do. So when you think about what city priorities are, what cities spend their money on, it comes out of this list. So if you go back to what we talked about right at the beginning about the different things that the municipal government actually spends its money on. Police and fire in Lethbridge is a third of the budget. That's pretty universal from city to city. Can be a little bit more, can be a little bit less, but it definitely dominates most city budget. And it really is about the protection of people and property, that sort of 7A clause. And really a lot of city expenses in Lethbridge and elsewhere are sort of baked in to operations and by the Municipal Government Act. And again, if you think about what I talked about at the beginning of the province really having all of the constitutional power over cities, it's not just sort of kind of a nerdy or niche point to make. It sort of explains some of the interactions, say, between AHS 911 in Alberta and municipalities running those services. How can the province just take it away? Is it possible for them to do that? Like it definitely is. It is legal. I mean, a really dramatic example of this sort of thing was in 2018, actually in Ontario, but governed under the same sort of rules, where if you had the unfortunate pleasure of following the Toronto municipal election that year, you will remember that in the middle of the election, the province decided to change the number of city councillors. Like in I think it was August or early September for a late October election, the province decided, oh, we're gonna not have 40 some odd councillors, we're now only gonna have 25 right in the middle of the election. It caused lots of people to have to run against one another, and some people were tired, and it was really a mess. And people were saying, this is outrageous. How can the province do this to the city in the middle of the election? And it's just because the powers of provinces really have quite a lot of influence over cities. Another big one here, and this can explain a lot of what goes on in city government as well, is the need to have balanced operating budgets for municipalities, the estimated revenue and transfers. You can read this yourself. But a unique feature of cities, as dictated by various municipal government acts, is that their operating budgets, their annual budgets, basically have to be balanced. So you'll have two budgets for the most part in municipal politics, operating and capital budgets. So the capital budgets are for the big ticket items, and obviously you can take out loans to pay for big public infrastructure projects. But the operating budgets, the annual sort of operating budgets, do need to be balanced. So one complaint people have often about cities is, oh, it seems like every year taxes go up and up and up, whereas it's basically mandated by the Municipal Government Act that even just to pay for things like inflation, you do have to make sure that the budgets are balanced. The fact that property taxes are the main source of revenue for city governments essentially also comes out of the Municipal Government Act, and it's quite a kind of a different approach to taxes than other jurisdictions. So income taxes predominate primarily in provincial and federal budgets, and that sort of is a different process. So you basically set the rate that you want to collect for an income tax, and then you just, I mean, if you're probably starting to put together your taxes right now, where you calculate your income and you say, oh, last year it turns out that I owed whatever, and you pay that to the provincial or federal governments. Whereas for cities, they actually set the mill rate in order to collect the amount of money that they want. So you'll see this term mill rate. It comes from cities providing a rate of tax based on how many thousands of dollars of value your house has. And you think, why is it called a mill rate? Someone just, like, do we all have like flour mills on our property? No, it's the old French etymological fun fact of the day, which is just that mill is 1,000, so it's per $1,000 of value. But the weird thing about property taxes, and again, this is sort of baked into the MGA, is that it's a little bit of relative, I'm going to say relativity, not being a physicist here, but it's a bit of relativity in terms of taxes. So if the city wants to collect the same amount of money from year to year, but my property goes up by 5%, but everybody else's property value goes up by 5%, nobody's taxes actually go up. They just actually change the rate to cut it down. So it's quite a different approach. And sometimes people are a little bit mystified by that, and I'm more than happy to answer more questions about how this works if you want. But it's really sort of baked into the system that you find in the Municipal Government Act. So it really operates everywhere the same in Alberta. And as I say here, these property tax systems are very different from income tax-based systems. So in provincial politics, as we know, in Alberta, it's hard for governments to predict how much money is coming in as a result of income taxes, because incomes can really fluctuate for all sorts of reasons, recessions, pandemics, everything you can imagine. So you can end up with huge deficits, sometimes huge surpluses if it's a good year. At the same time, though, whatever the opposite of the same time is, but in contrast, for municipalities, property taxes are actually pretty stable in one way, at least, in terms of you can pretty much predict how much money a city is going to make. But this is one of the reasons why, and that land use actually ends up dominating as a main issue for local governments. I mean, I often joke that every local politics issue boils down to parking, but that's certainly true in Calgary. And it's really because it's all about kind of land use and property taxes. And again, if we're talking about the Municipal Government Act, it really comes out essentially from that list. And I mean, this is less for you to read specifically, at least on the screen, but the Municipal Government Act really outlines what the council, what duties of councillors are. So I mean, really, if you are running for council, your main charge under the Municipal Government Act is to consider the welfare and interest of the municipality as a whole, and to bring to council's attention anything that would promote the welfare or interest of the municipality, and participate sort of in the bigger picture strategic planning of the municipality. But the structures of cities under these laws are actually, in a vague way, sort of set by the Municipal Government Act as well. You'll often have you'll have a number of councillors. Obviously, you'll have chief administrative officers, so basically the city manager in the case of the larger cities. You also have, if you're reading the MGA, you'll notice this reference to chief elected officials. So for the most part, mayors or reeves will have these roles. But under the Municipal Government Act, and this is true in most of Canada, mayors actually don't usually have significantly different powers from local councillors. There is definitely some difference, and you can flip through what those are. But we go with in Canada what we refer to as a weak mayor system, and this is not a personal criticism of any mayor. It's actually just a system where a city council contains councillors and a mayor, and they all each have one vote, and there aren't significantly different powers for the mayor, in contrast to a lot of American mayors who are considered to be strong mayor systems, where they can have things like vetoes, they can appoint many more people to all sorts of jobs, which doesn't really exist in Canada. So in Canada, the mayor and council, as much as the mayor will often be more prominent, will be elected by a larger number of voters across the city, in the most part, Lethbridge being an exception with the at-large system. But for the most part in Canada, there are two or three exceptions. we do see this sort of weak mayor system where mayors and council are relatively equal. And again, people often sort of puzzle about why all of these rules exist and where do they, where can you find them? It really is just boiled down to the importance of sort of at least sort of grasping at a high level some of the details in the Municipal Government Act. So I mean, to sort of wrap up this sort of at least little thought piece, I guess, to kick us off here. If you're interested in what the city of Lethbridge is charged to do and what it's supposed to do, you really should flip through the Municipal Government Act, and it really does outline in a way why land and land use and property values end up really being a predominant issue in local politics because of the sandbox that the province creates for the city of Lethbridge to sort of play in. And if you're developing good municipal policy ideas, and you're asking my advice, and you know, I'd question your taste in asking me, I guess. The best ideas are good, so make sure they're good. That's good, but also that they're possible within the Municipal Government Act. I'll tell you a little anecdote now. So in 2019, I had the good fortune of being asked to sit on a working group about a downtown tax shift issue, which is was difficult to think about enough that I won't burden you with it. But we were just trying to solve this idea that downtown property values were, for businesses, were going down so much that it was shifting responsibility to pay tax to suburban businesses, and what we would do about this. And every time, and honestly, without the word of a lie, every time someone would come up with a good idea, we say, oh, that sounds like it could be a practical solution. We'd consult the Municipal Government Act, and it turned out it wasn't possible under the Municipal Government Act. So if you're looking to come up with good ideas for an election campaign, really the Municipal Government Act is your friend in terms of helping you figure out what is possible. And when I say possible, I mean even sort of the city's responsibility and also importantly legal. So again, if you're looking for more reading, at least a flip through the MGA. I'm not saying that you really need to read all 600 of the pages, but at least sort of understanding from a high level what's in it can really help sort of flesh out your picture of what cities and municipalities actually do. And on the Lethbridge Council website specifically, if you look at the elections website that they have set up, there's a really helpful guide, the council member handbook, which is, I think, put out by the province, but it's not always available on every municipality's website. So I'm really happy that Lethbridge has made that publicly available. And it really does provide a sort of a speedy view through the Municipal Government Act and a few other similar things. So I mean, I hope, I mean, certainly if you've read the MGA before, congratulations on that. But if you haven't, I really would recommend the best way to kind of get to know at least the sandbox that you're playing in as a City of Lethbridge council member. It really is outlined in the Municipal Government Act. So I mean, I'll stop sharing my screen now. And then, did we want to go to Lisa, or do we want to take questions first, or?
Anybody has questions for Paul, you can just type them into the Q&A box at the very bottom of your screen. I just click on that, you can type in any questions and I will read them out for you. So we'll give everybody a moment to see if anybody has any questions.
And I will hang around as well for a bit like the releases and so on presentations. So if people have more later as well, it's okay.
It doesn't look like we have any immediate questions, so why don't we turn things over to Lisa, and then we can, if anybody has any questions for Paul, we can always ask those after Lisa's presentation as well. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, hi everyone, and welcome back to some of you. 2 weeks ago, I spoke to a smaller group of you who were interested in running, and they were all women. So what I'm going to be presenting today is going to draw a little bit from that. So those of you have seen some of it, but I expanded it so that I am not boring those of you who have already been here. I'll start with just sharing my screen so we can get going. So I want to start with, and I introduced this last time as well. Are voters biased against women as candidates? This has been studied a fair amount in the political science literature, and I would draw you to one particular, the well-named article, which is called "Do Women Get Fewer Votes?" ? No, period. So the evidence is that women do not get fewer votes at the provincial or federal level. And in fact, a very recent paper by Sevi, the same Sevi of the earlier article, Sevi and a number of others in 2021 took the data from a municipal election database. This was just published about a month ago. And what they found, and I recreate here their regression results, is that in fact, women get a bit of a boost in municipal elections. And incumbents get a huge boost. So women get about a 6 percentage point boost, and incumbents get a 34% percentage point boost in probability of election. Now, the reason is because really, there are no parties in most municipal elections in Canada. And so without parties, people don't have heuristics for voting. They don't know how to determine who to vote for amongst a bunch of names. And so incumbency brings with it name recognition. And so what you're seeing here with a 34-point bump is essentially people recognize the names of incumbents and will therefore choose those people. With women, I think what we're seeing then is that it's another heuristic that people might use is gender. And so because they want to see more women on council, they're more likely to vote for a woman, even if they don't know very much about her. So everyone should be encouraged to run, but I will say that if you're an incumbent, you get a big boost, and if you're a woman, you get a small boost in votes. If you're an incumbent woman, and there are so few, then you, I guess, could add those two together potentially. I don't think you can actually. So what I want to talk about though today, then, if you've made the decision to run and you now know that voters are not biased against you, what does it take to be a candidate? What do you need for a campaign? And what will it take to win both money and votes wise? So eligibility, whenever I talk about this, my students are always shocked, is often overthought. There's fairly small barriers to overcome to eligibility. You must be 18 on election day, so not really, you don't need to be 18 a long time in advance. You need to be resident in the area, qualified to vote. If you're an employee of the city or the town, you must be on leave. You can't be in tax arrears, but that doesn't count for this year's taxes. And you must not have been disqualified already. Very few people are. You have to have a nomination paper with a few people on it. In my community, I don't live in Lethbridge, but in my community, it's only 5 people. It is higher in other communities. Just look into the rules in your community. You may want to have an official agent, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. You have to have a deposit. The highest in Alberta is just $1,000. And you have to have a bank account if you're accepting donations. But if you're totally self-funded, you do not need to have a bank account, separate bank account. So the official agent is your treasurer. They would be kind of in charge of your bank account if you need it, but you can be self-funded because the rules are under the Local Elections Authorities Act that you can fund up to $10,000 of your own campaign if you're totally self-funded. So in other words, accepting no donations, then you do not require a bank account, okay? Who should you have on your team? Well, yeah, obviously you. But I'd like you to consider adding a few other people and not just having yourself. And so having someone, that official agent who's very good at rules, I'm going to talk about the rules in a minute, having someone to look over the content, a writer perhaps, maybe somebody who can just edit you, somebody who's good at asking for money because not all people are. And if you are doing social media, you may want to hand your social media over to someone. You want that person to be exceptionally able to reflect who you are, and capable of doing that. But someone very trusted might be good at that. And the number one thing I'd like you to do is have somebody that will go door knocking with you, because I'm going to tell you how door knocking is the single biggest thing that you can do to win an election. What about those rules that you might need a campaign official agent for? Well, it's only individual Albertans who can donate. Lots of things are contributions, not just cash. And the most you can get from a donor is $5,000. But as I said, a candidate can contribute up to 10. You are not allowed to accept any money at all before you are officially nominated. So do not accept any money before you are nominated. You can take pledges, of course. And you should not accept any money that would contravene the rules. So make sure you know the rules, and make sure that you know who's donating to you. So disclosures are required for donations over $50, but you must know who is donating to you so that you know that they are not contravening the rules. Once you have accepted $1,000 in donations, you have to have a bank account open. So I would recommend, if you're going to accept donations, open a bank account. And have your official agent tracking this. So eligibility is pretty easy. The team can be quite small, but I would recommend having at least a couple of people that you trust around you when you're running. But what is it that you're doing? What is the thing that you have to accomplish? So I looked over the last 5 elections in Lethbridge, and I think it's indicative of other places too. So I think, most of you are probably looking at running in Lethbridge. What does it take to run? So from 2017 back to 2004, I've looked at all of the amounts. What I did is I basically took anybody who got over 3,000 votes. So if they got less than 3,000 votes, I just took them off, because for the most part, they didn't spend any money, right? So they're not very good on the average. They're not helpful, and they were nowhere near winning. I'm going to show you why. That's less than half of what it took to win for votes. So in terms of money spent, averaged less than $5,000 across all these elections. Some elections, it cost a little bit more to win than it did to lose. Some elections, people spent more to lose than the ones did to win. Okay, so if you look back at 2007, what you're seeing there is that some people put a lot of money into a losing campaign. In 2017, we had people put more into winning campaigns than losing campaigns. There was a big gap between people who won on council and people who did not come in the top 7. Top 8. The top one was kind of off the charts in terms of numbers, so it didn't kind of skew the results. Turnout generally in Lethbridge and through these elections has been 29%. So it's that's sort of an average across all these years. In years in which there is a new mayor running, so where it's a contested position, there will be a higher turnout. So certainly I would expect more than a 30% turnout this time, because Mayor Spearman has said he will not be running again. So roughly winners and losers spend about the same amount of money if they're getting over 3,000 votes, right? Like basically $5,000 to $7,000 is what you need. $5,000 in order to get the 7,000 votes that you're going to need to win. And that's basically what you need, about 7,000. Okay, if you look over 2017 was a little bit higher. Some years have been a little bit lower. What you're seeing mostly here, and 2007 is a good example of it, is just whether or not seats were highly contested and whether or not there was incumbents running for the mayorship, or if the mayor was in by acclamation, which was the 2007 case. So you're going to need about $5,000. You're going to need about 7,000 votes. And how do you do that? How do you get those? So I say start with your immediate circle. Ask those people for money. Ask them for their vote. Confirm that they will, vote for you, and then begin to move beyond that. You don't know 7,000 people, And unless you're already on council, you probably don't have the name recognition to be able to garner 7,000 with just your name alone. As I said, because voters have to use heuristics, they're looking for how they might know you. So names at the top of the ballot, i.e. earlier in the alphabet, get higher votes, you know, because people kind of just tick it down. Or they may recognize your name because you were on TV or something like that. If you are a realtor, you do a little bit better because realtors' names are all over the place, right? So what you're looking for are ways of expanding the number of people who recognize your name. The number one way to do that is door knocking. Now, I recognize that in a COVID world, this might be difficult. We've had a number of provincial elections across the country that have been conducted during COVID. So we know that there are mechanisms to continue to do this in some way, at least. But it is important to connect with voters, get your name out there a little bit, and ask people for their vote. Because voter turnout is so low, below 30%, voting is not the norm, right? You are not expecting most people to vote. So you need to make sure that you are talking to people who will commit to voting. And one of the ways of doing that is collecting their name and their phone number. When you have their cell phone number, then you can text them to remind them to vote later, because there's some science behind this. And that's what I wanted to kind of wrap up with, is just what is the science? I personally have worked on a lot of campaigns, municipally, provincially, federally. I've done a lot of losing campaigns, and I've done a few winning campaigns. I'm going to tell you that winning campaigns are funner in the end. And the winning campaigns tend to rely on a couple of key factors. One of them is starting out as early as possible. So if you're considering running right now, you need to make a decision very soon, because the earlier you get started on this, the better. The book Get Out the Vote, which is sort of the Bible of how to increase voter turnout, has a number of really important pieces. I'm only going to pull three, but one of the things you'll want to do is to help your voters to construct a plan of when and where they will vote. What we've found in the experimental work that's been done on this in elections is that when a voter has a plan about when, where, and how they will vote, then they have a 4.1 percentage point bump, right? So remembering back to like what is going to move people's votes, 4.1 percentage to you is pretty good, right? If you can get people to commit to vote. The second thing is to try to appeal to people's desire to conform to the social norm of voting. Now, I just told you that in fact, in municipal elections, it is not a norm to vote. It is actually less than half of people are voting. So it is important to try to get groups of people who are committing to vote. So if you know people, you know, a coffee party or something like that, and a number of people there say they're going to vote for you and that they are voters, that then triggers other people's desire to be part of the norm of voting, and so they're more likely to vote. In fact, in experimental data, this was found to increase the chances of a person turning out by 8 percentage points if you're appealing to that sort of social norm. And what they did in that example was that they provided postcards to people in an area saying that all of their neighbors were planning on voting. And so people want to be part of what everybody's doing. This is essentially why campaign signs work. Okay, campaign signs are doing two things. They're triggering, well, there are three things really. They're triggering people to realize that there's an election going on, because quite frankly, most people are not paying attention. So you're triggering that. Secondly is that you're getting your name out there and you're triggering, you know, kind of a name recognition thing happening. But the third thing is the most important one, and that is that you are demonstrating that people know who you are and plan on voting, okay? this is that appeal that I want you to be doing. So I don't love signs, but I know they work. So you probably do need to get signs. And finally, when you're engaging with people, you want to try to trigger their notion of being a voter, that identity side, rather than just casting a vote. So what was found in this is when the notion of identity versus activity was triggered, you had a 10 percentage point increase in turnout. So we want to get people thinking of themselves as being a voter. And so one of the ways that they did this is they asked people, how important is it to you to be a voter, right? And so it's complicated to ask that in a door-to-door campaign, but you are trying to find people who perceive themselves as being a voter, who like and wish to be part of the norm of voting, and will work with you to create a plan that you can then help them by reminding them to vote as the day gets closer. And so those are the ways that we work on getting out the vote. So key to it, though, is having your own plan of how you're going to meet and collect information about voters, collecting money, because that will then help you to do those things like buy signs, and engage with voters, encouraging them to have a plan, conform to the social norm of voting, and see themselves as being a voter. So final thoughts on this is Paul and I have a dear friend, Melanie Thomas, at the University of Calgary. She has found that just 1% of women and 5% of men ever consider a political candidacy. So I want to thank you all for being part of that special group. And if I can be of any assistance to you, please feel free to reach out to me. I am lisa.lambert@uleth.ca. And I will stop my share. So I didn't see what was in the Q&A, but I'll turn it over to Jonathan and he can.
Okay. So we had one question that came in just as we were switching over between Paul and Lisa here. And I think both of you could probably answer this one. Somebody wanted to know if there is a municipal politics for dummies, which I don't know that there is, but is there books that you might recommend for somebody or publications to look at for people who are interested in running for office?
Well, I always recommend Paul Fairie's classes at the University of Calgary and the continuing education. So, because he does a one-day class that's brilliant. He does one on Alberta politics. He's done them on municipal. Even I think you've done federal too, haven't you, Paul?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great.
They're
I've
good
taken
time.
them. I love them. So I would recommend that. But maybe Paul has some specific resources.
Well, I'm glad you said that. It would have made me look too immodest to recommend that myself. But yes, so I mentioned this just right at the end of the when I was talking. Is there on the Lethbridge elections website? Really great resource from the province. Actually, it's called Council Members Handbook. And it is less about, I guess, some of the really practical and useful things Lisa was talking about being a candidate, but it really will cover sort of Alberta municipal politics, especially from the perspective of someone. It's actually, I do strongly recommend that one.
We have another question from Kevin. He wants to know the bank account that you need for campaigning. Does it need to be just a simple personal checking and savings account, or is there a special account type that you need?
Paul, do you know that specifically? I mean, I remember reading the Local Authorities Elections Act. It says that it has to be specific to the campaign. Like you can't use one of your other accounts. Like you have to open an account, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
yes. As far as I know, it just has to be like a separate account. You don't want your like the campaign money mixing with your own money. You can imagine the trouble that would cause. Yeah.
We have one other question here. Do candidates, are they able to get access to previous voter lists?
As far as I know that, and this is maybe a question for some of the council members, but most municipalities do not maintain one. So there isn't a voters list essentially.
I think you're muted, Jonathan.
If anybody else has any questions for Lisa or Paul, feel free to throw them into the Q&A right away here. And if we don't have any questions right away, we will move on to our Q&A panel with some current and former people who've been involved in municipal government, and we'll get some real life experience so we can find out what it's like to run for office. Don't see any other questions, so at the same time here I can get Julie and Lance, and you can turn on your video now, and we will get started with that right away here.
Jonathan, it says my host has stopped my video.
Let's see if I can. At the very bottom, on the bottom left, can you turn your video up? You should have the mute button in the video.
Yes, I know. And it
Turn it on, it
says
won't let you.
you cannot start your video because the host stopped it.
Hmm.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. What I can get you to do, Julie, if you quickly sign out and sign back in.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I'll do that right away.
Back on for you.
Okay.
Yeah, let's take a second for Julie to rejoin us here.
Hey, Jonathan, while we're waiting, I'll just let everyone know if you are a person who's thinking about running in Lethbridge, the city clerk's office will be running some sessions probably in the spring. So watch for those, and they'll have information in those sessions that are specific to rules in Lethbridge, what you can and cannot do, etc. So they don't have a date yet, but just watch for those.
Still waiting for Julie to rejoin us here. But in the meantime, I'll introduce the we've. Oh, here she's back. Perfect, we can see you now.
Okay, thank you.
So we have our three panelists. We have Trevor Lewington, who is the mayor of the town of Stirling. We have Lance Tailfeathers with us, who is a former councillor from the Blood Tribe. And we have Julie Friesen, who is a councillor in the city of Medicine Hat. Thank you all for joining us. Just to our audience, if you have any questions, you can range pretty much on any topic about running for election. Just feel free to put them in the Q&A box. It's at the very bottom of your screen, right near the center. You can just click on it and type in your question, and I'll read it out to our panelists. And just to start with, maybe we'll start on the topic of campaigning. What is the most challenging aspect that you found of running a campaign? Maybe since we have you unmuted, Julie, I'll get you to start us off with that question.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. One of the most challenging, but challenges also come with rewards. So I should say that at the offset. One of the most challenging things for me has been to keep up with all the writing that you need to do, along with all the public things and the door knocking and that kind of thing. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people don't see. You get a tremendous amount of questions from folks that require not just a couple sentence answer. You get a lot of surveys from groups or organizations that people aren't aware of, and you want to give them some good thought and some good response. And some of those come from recognized groups as well, like the chambers of commerce and so on. But to make sure that you are handling that, getting back to folks on social media if you've chosen to do that and you don't have someone doing it for you. But you want to oversee that part too, and making sure you have the time to spend doing the other requirements plus your family is challenging and it's rewarding.
Do you have anything you'd like to add to that, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, I think every situation is different. So Stirling is only 1,300 people, so it's a little easier to get to know people in the community. You can be much more visible. I found social media very effective. So there's a couple of very active Stirling-based community groups on Facebook where each has roughly 1,000 members, so it's a good chunk of the community. So that's a great place for discussions. Although it's a little bit different when someone's hiding behind their keyboard and they can be a keyboard warrior as opposed to having a conversation on the doorstep. So with that caveat in mind, it is a powerful tool. I also found that I was able to put written documents in people's mailboxes. So direct mail, providing sort of a campaign flyer, if you will, was a great way to get my message out and make sure it was in everybody's hand. And this is the kind of community where people will come knock on your door, they'll catch you at the post office. And it took a long time to get anywhere or do anything once the campaign started, because that was most of the time walking around town was just, bumping into conversation after conversation. But, as Julie hinted at, and I think both Paul and Lisa spoke to this, there couldn't be a more important time for municipal government right now. I think if you're on the list of attendees tonight and you're giving it a thought, first of all, thank you. As Lisa said, this is the level of government that impacts people the most. It's where a lot of decisions get made and people sort of take it for granted. And it requires strong leadership and a lot of engagement. So I'm really pleased to see people attend tonight and look forward to the questions. Thanks.
Lance, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think just thanks for the information this evening. I'm learning quite a bit just, with the First Nations politics versus municipalities and also provincial. The Blood Tribe is a unique circumstance because I believe 1/3 lives off reserve in the different cities and towns. And so during the course of the campaign, I live off reserve. And so you have a bit of I'd say almost like a constituents to off reserve members. And so through the course of my campaign, I knew I was running on that ticket, but also I had to find ways of getting and reaching out to members of our community. So it was backwards and forwards with social media, but also the more of the traditional approach. And what I have come to find is understanding the culture, because a lot of times part of protocols, you don't go door knocking to those who are a bit more of traditional in society, members and stuff like that. So just a matter of strategy. So there's a lot of kids that are more apt to social media, and then trying to find out your elders and your knowledge keepers who just like that face-to-face, hands-on approach. I think even just my observation from this evening, I think with the elections coming up, because of the pandemic, now we're subjected to such a Zoom meeting this evening, is to really focus on how do you reach out to members on social platforms. Of course, Twitter, and we know where that ends up. Anyways, thanks.
Our next question is, what did you find was the most, when you were running your campaigns in the past, what was the most effective method of campaigning for you? Let's start this one off with Trevor, and then we'll make our way around.
Yeah, again, I think I hinted at this already, but based on the fact that this is a relatively small community, everybody's your neighbor, that face-to-face interaction, it's much easier, of course, to get and meet many of your constituents here. But I think that's far more powerful. And there's a bit of an expectation as well that people want to know who their candidate is, and they have an expectation they're going to know you personally. So that's contextual to Stirling's situation. But I think that's true at even bigger centers. You have to make it personal. You have to have a personal connection with people, and they have to know who you are and what you stand for. So hopefully there's enough exposure through social media or TV or interviews or debates and discussions. The people that are interested are gonna want to find out more about you.
Lance, would you like to add anything there? What was you find the most effective?
Yeah, the most effective to me was being way ahead of the game. I know in the community there, a lot of people don't like that last minute where you're trying to make friends and handshakes and get to know people just because you want the vote. And so prior, I knew about maybe a couple of years. I've run 2 terms, 2012 and this last 2016 was really a personal approach to where I was participating in social events and starting to get to know the community and actually listen and ask people. I'm thinking of running for council, but spending that one-on-one with an individual and hearing them out is how you could best represent what they think that position of responsibility is about. That's what I've learned from this last term of campaign.
Okay. And Julie, what was your most effective method?
Well, it's an interesting question. just by way of background, I'm a longstanding council member. This is my 7th term. Many times I've been the only woman, not always. And I've held responsibility for all of the major portfolios in council. So I've got lots of experience, but that doesn't make me important. And I think for me, that's my the most compelling thing about me. I don't like talking about myself, but you know, I certainly did some door knocking. I certainly did some social media. I did signs, which I hate, and Lisa talked about that. But I've got to tell you, a lot of the time it becomes about the stupid signs. And I say stupid because they're manpower intensive, they're expensive, and the campaign isn't about a sign at all. You want people to understand your stance on strategy and policy development and all of those important things. And very often they just talk about, well, who's got the most signs. So signs are important too, though. I think Lance touched on it for me. It depends on your personality, but I'm a relationship builder, and I made sure that I took a lot of time and did a lot of visits to groups, organizations, gatherings, large or small, those kinds of things where I could actually make a connection with people and talk to them. I made arrangements to go to all the seniors facilities and all of those kinds of things, recreational facilities. Talk to people because, and maybe Lisa, I should have asked her this question myself. It used to be this little formula that you would use, and it was that if you got one person on your side, you had 7 more. So I don't believe you want to just get people on your side because you want their vote. You want them to share your policy positions by and large, but I think that's an important consideration as well.
We have a question from the audience here concerning Lisa mentioned that door knocking is one of the most effective ways of campaigning. And they want to know, is there a certain day or time that you find is more successful for door knocking compared to others? And why don't we start with you, Lance, and then we'll go to Julie and then Trevor.
Well,
Oh, sorry. I think just being timely. I know I was making a lot of appointments, as Julie mentioned, prior to community members. And I remember in 2012, social media wasn't quite making a lot of noise then. So I was on, as I was on the phone talking to people, connecting and networking and saying, look, can I come visit you for the evening? I'd even sponsor, bring a bit of takeaway food for them and sit down with them. And so a lot of times it was in the evenings, early evenings. You want to get too late or people work during the day. And that was my approach. Thanks.
Julie?
Yeah, I would suggest weekends, not too early in the morning and not too late. And also early evenings or after work, like starting about 4:30, but don't be there when they're trying to eat dinner because you'll tick them off. So there are some kind of norms, but people are funny about things like that. If you're going to go visit an organization like a seniors place, don't go when they're eating because they're mad. They don't want you to. It's the best time to go because they're all gathered in one place, but don't do it because you'll tick them off and then they're going to be against you. So those were the times that I found the best. Although if you are able to access, and you should be able to from your municipality, you may not be able to access a voters list. That question came up earlier, but you can access the demographics of how the voters voted. So they'll tell you where the statistics around voting in the different areas of your city, and that's good, and the demographics of that area. So you can get some of that information and try to figure out if you've got a lot of retired people in one area, then go there during the day. If you've got a lot of people who work that working demographic or people with children, it depends on how much information you get, then you can stagger your times based on when you think they might be home.
And Trevor?
Yeah, I have a confession to make that I've been on council for 2 terms, so I'm wrapping up 8 years on council, and I've never knocked a single door. So
Wow.
my approach has always been to be accessible talk to community groups, and, you know, and have people come to me. And I think it's partly my personal loathing of people knocking on my door and, to Julie's point, irritating you during supper or when you're trying to sleep in. So I was always really mindful of that and set up, you know, opportunities for people to come to me, which served me well, but again, maybe just reflective of the smaller community. But I didn't do door knocking, so just another perspective.
We have a question here. This in our last session, so you want to run for office, it sort of came up, but he'd like to hear your perspectives on this topic. There's the potential referendum questions being on the ballot, and they wanted to know how that might affect campaigns and how should candidates deal with that factor in this election. Julie, do you want to start us off?
I can. Now, I'm not in Lethbridge, I'm in Medicine Hat, and we're not looking, although we were a little while ago, but we're no longer looking at a referendum. It would affect you in I think a few ways. One is if this referendum vote, pardon me, is compelling to people and they're really interested and energized by it, and usually they are if it's a referendum, then the voter turnout will be higher. And when the voter turnout is higher, the demographic changes sometimes. So you have to take a look and analyze that the best you can and try to reach some of those different groups of people. That will be to your advantage. In your public forums and your election materials and how you talk with people, make sure you have a clear picture of your position on that. And be prepared to know that some people will love you for it and some people will freaking well hate you for it. And that can switch around, you know, back and forth a little bit. But you can't be wishy-washy and say, oh, I feel this way. And then you hear a whole bunch of people, oh, maybe I'd feel this way. Like, be firm, be clear, be confident in your positions when you're running for office. And it's okay sometimes to say I changed my mind, but you have to be really confident about that. So yeah, with the referendum, you have to pay attention to that in some different kinds of ways, and I say be clear about your position. Also be careful not to get caught up too much. Social media has an advantage and it has a distinct disadvantage, because there's a core group of people who use particularly Twitter that start to sound to you like they represent the majority. And very often they represent the minority. And so you're playing to the minority when you need to be listening to the majority.
Okay, Trevor, do you have anything to add about referendums?
Yeah, I mean, the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, or AUMA, represents municipalities in Alberta, and they have lobbied hard with the provincial government to try and prevent a referendum and a senatorial election this fall. And unfortunately, we're getting both. So there will be at least one, possibly two referendum questions from the province on the ballot, as well as a Senate election. So now you've got this complexity of some sort of issue that will be on the ballot for electors to consider, plus a partisan campaign to elect a senator in Alberta. So, you know, you should fully expect to be dragged into those conversations. You will likely have to take a position. I think, you know, it's good advice that Julie mentioned is, you know, don't be afraid to take a position. People are looking for you to be decisive, but at the same time, try and steer it back to municipal issues. I think it will be a bit of a distraction. At the same time, you know, there's lots of local issues that are a concern, and you want to make sure you tease those out of people that you're connecting with and having those conversations. So be prepared for the distraction, be prepared to have an answer in your pocket, but you know, don't let that steer you away from what the message you want to get out in your platform and connecting with your voters, because ultimately that's really what we should be focused on.
And Lance, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
No, just that the elections I've been involved with have never had referendums, just a general election of chief and council. I think that's been basically the past practice as well. Thanks.
We have another question. Jeffrey asks, what are some of the techniques that you've used to build strong relationships with neighboring division councillors so they can help push your campaign objectives? Trevor, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, so in Stirling, we elect a council of 5. We actually don't vote directly for the mayor. The mayor is selected by council after the election, so it's a little bit of a different system. But in our last election, there were 11 people campaigning for those 5 spots. And in Lethbridge's case, I think the last election for the 9 positions, there were actually 29 candidates. So, you know, having other people that are aligned around your ideas and helping share them is useful. The caution I would give is that you don't want to be perceived as having a slate. That is a group of 3 or 4 or 5 candidates that will always vote the same way and that are of the same mind. I think that's, you know, municipal politics in Alberta don't have parties. People see it as sort of the last place of true politics and representatives that reflect the values and thoughts of their constituents. So there's a bit of a risk in that if you seem to be partnered up with other candidates, that you may be seen as a block, and that could work against you, again, depending on your perspective. However, I think it's very important to engage other candidates in the campaign, understand where they're coming from and where there's alignment, so that there can be common voices on the same issue. So in the last election, I made a point of reaching out to each other candidate that was running and having a sit-down conversation, and there were certainly places where we agreed and others where we didn't. And that's useful to understand because, you know, some of these people are going to be people sitting at the table with you, and you will have to work together if you're successful. So it's important to understand why they're running, what's important to them, because that will come into play much later.
And Lance, do you have anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, that's an old adage too that I attempted chief and council, I believe, about 4 times. We have our elections every 4 years. Usually a lot of people will get ambitious or new ones that want to run in the election, and they'll say, well, there's 12 a chief and council around the table to get the issues pushed forward, or what they think their politics are, that they'll need 7 of them. So I've always been asked or to participate in a run of 7 people. I've learned some hard lessons, but at the same time is that you're running there as an individual to the table. And I've always politely said, no, I need to really understand the issues at hand. I can't just go in as a group. And knowingly that, again, you might not agree with some of the issues that they're pushing forward. And I remember the movie Milk, Harvey Milk, the mayor of San Francisco, what that turned into. If you're doing favors and if I back you up on this issue, will you back me up on that one? So again, that's politics and that's what comes with it. So again, I was always an individual, and again, understanding that you need to understand the issue and not just, you know, attempt to buddy up with somebody because he ran on the same platform, or the notion of, well, let's get in there, this is what we can push together. That's my experience. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Julie, do you have any final thoughts there?
Yeah, I certainly echo what's been said by my colleagues on the panel. It's almost to me like a kiss of death if you want to get a partner or have this little cohesion of running together. It does not work. Having said that, though, I think it's really important to demonstrate a respect for those who are running alongside you. They have dreams and aspirations and ideas just like you do. And whether they're successful or not, I think it's important that if you want to be a leader, you need to model leadership qualities and respect for other people. I mean, I've been at several election forums now where I've whispered an answer or a little bit of an answer to help a colleague out when I'm an incumbent and they're not, and they're struggling to find something, because in the end, it's the people you serve that are benefiting from the answer. So I think that's really important. I wanted to just make a quick comment about, because the question mentioned region, so I wasn't quite sure about the intent, but I would imagine both of my colleagues on the panel and certainly in the city of Medicine Hat, we have developed a very strong relationship with our regional neighbors. And we have an intermunicipal committee where we get together and talk about things that are to the benefit of any of the 3 or to the region as the number 4, win to the power of 4. And I think those are great things to bring up when you're talking in a campaign as well. This isn't just about us. We're considerate, you know, we talk about our neighbors, we talk about things together, and we talk about success collectively sometimes, but not always, because I mean, we're first, but we also have some successes that we can share together.
It's interesting that you mentioned election forums in your answer there, Julie, because the next question, somebody asked what your opinions are on election forums, and do you find participating in them as a valuable tool for your campaign? And maybe we'll turn to Julie first there.
Okay, I kind of like election forums. I mean, this is a high pressure environment where you're just like, ugh, but I kind of like that. And I don't think they're as valuable as you think they are when you're preparing for them or when you're in front of all those people and you're nervous. But I can tell you this, there are X number of people in the audience, often your family members and your supporters anyways, you've already got their phone. But there are a whole bunch more that are watching it on TV or watching it later on some kind of a YouTube or whatever other platform there is. And so you are getting quite a bit of coverage from those. And there's also the media there that reflects some of your policy positions when they're writing about you. And it's not just once, they're often reflected again and again in media or social, the different social sites, whatever they happen to be. So I think there is some benefit. It's not the be all end all, but it's one way of getting your message across.
Lance, do you have an opinion on election forums?
Yeah, again, it's really being selective of which forum you're going to participate in. I know throughout the course of my campaigns over the years, a lot of sports groups would get together and try to raise money for various forums. So I think it's just being prepared. My background is in communications, and I know at each forum they give you 5 to 10 minutes. I don't know what the formats are here, but there's a introduction of yourself, and then you do your spiel, and then they have a Q&A at the end of it. But again, it's being mindful, because a lot of times, earlier days, there was just whoever showed up to the forum, which would be family and friends, and of course your supporters or your immediate family. But now the playing field has changed to where it's available, like on Zoom. It's going to be recorded, or it's going to be on social media later. But I think whatever forum you're a part of, it just to really be to do your homework, understand the issues that are around, that are within your environment of the office that you're seeking, and being prepared. But forums are effective. Again, you select and you choose which ones are you're going to participate in, see if they're worth the efforts of your campaign, and also just being prepared. And short and sweet is always the avenue, because it's like, you're getting into your issue and it's like, all right, you have 1 minute left, and then they cut you off. So again, that's always a stickler. But anyways, thanks. It is effective though. Thanks.
Yeah. Trevor, do you have any final thoughts on election forums?
Yeah, I mean, I think forums are yet another tool in the toolbox. I mean, again, to Lance's point, you want to be mindful of you can't attend everything necessarily, but it is another way to get your name and face out there. It is a way to engage with people. Be prepared, be concise, and make the most of the opportunity. And it's often the handshaking, although in a pre-COVID or post-COVID world, I guess it'll be elbow bumping that happens in the hallway after the forum, is really the power of that venue. Maybe not necessarily your 2 minutes on stage. And in Lethbridge's last election with 29 candidates, the forums, it's pretty limited in terms of amount of time you'll have to speak. But again, the conversation after the fact and just being present, I think, is important.
Jonathan, can I give one more little tip here?
Yeah.
I just, with forums, usually there are time restrictions, and very often you're not allowed to take notes with you. They're structured and so on. My little tips would be this. In your preparation, decide what your 2 or 3 absolute key messages are. Then practice this thing. You don't have to have a mirror. You have to have a timer. Practice this thing. Decide where to emphasize your words, your key points. Do not allow yourself to practice past your allotted time. And when you're practicing, you tend to talk faster. And when you're up there, you're going to say, no, you have to be, be very mindful about forwarding your message. So practice, make sure you're ending a few seconds before what your time would be, and make sure your absolute key messages are at the beginning.
I'd like to just add one thing to reflect back on what everyone said about forums. It is a captured group of people, whether they are, in person or on a Zoom or something like that, that you want to utilize with your voice, but also use your team to capture those people, right? Like, I think sometimes we pay so much attention to the words that you're saying at the microphone as the candidate that you forget that you can utilize your team members to go around and meet with people, to hand out your material, hand out your card, collect names and phone numbers, use those groups of captured voters, because that's an engaged group of people that, if you went to a room with 100 people, it would be pretty unlikely to find that much engagement as you would find in a forum.
Okay. Our next question is again about campaigning. Is there anything that you would advise people not to do during a campaign? Is there anything sort of, it's going to be a misstep if you try and do it? Why don't we start with Lance on this one?
I think going with forums, really understanding the emotion of the campaign season, understanding the issues. Sometimes there'll be a hot topic issue. I know through this campaign was the coal mining, this last the First Nations campaign. So again, it's really understanding the issue, not getting the emotion get the best of you, because you can really, that can really bite you in the rear end, especially with social media. And just being mindful, because now we live in glass houses, and all I can impress is understanding the knee-jerk reactions that gets you, things taken out of context. So it's really being mindful if questions are asked to you in a forum setting, or just when you're doing a one-on-one campaigning. Just being strategic with that. That's been a few things I've had to really wear. I think that also my experience as an incumbent is that you're sort of painted with the same brush. If there's issues that the community wasn't up in arms about, this last time was the coal mining, did we sign off on it or didn't we? So again, was there Purdue consultation? So each individual councillor has, has sort of how they would like to approach that, but then again, that's what comes with it. And so just being mindful, that's all I can express here. Thanks.
Julie, do you have anything you'd advise people again?
Yeah, no, I really liked what you said, Lance. For me, I guess it's don't let it get personal. Keep away from it being personal and be mindful about doing that. And keep it on the up and up. Run a positive campaign. If there's the dirt digging and the name slaying and all that kind of stuff, it can happen subtly, usually in a municipal election, not so overtly like it does federally. But be very mindful about keeping positive. I can tell you that people, although they take great joy in gossip and mongering and all that kind of stuff, they still really respect the candidates who keep it positive. I'll remind you of Michelle Obama. So when they go low, we go high. And I think keep that in your head, and keep that you're sharing information, you're sharing facts as you know them, and you're not connecting in a controversial issue in an emotional way.
Trevor, do you have any final thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I'll just build on that. I mean, I agree totally with Lance and Julie in terms of what they've said. And I think to build on that, be yourself. At the end of the day, this isn't a stage production. People are expecting to know who you are. They're expecting to hear your ideas. And so this isn't, the showbiz of US politics and the showmanship, or even in some Canadian circles. This is grassroots municipal politics. Most of these people are your neighbors, or they know your neighbors, and you're going to see them at community events. So keep it real, and in turn, hopefully that helps you stay grounded and keeps it from becoming personal, and helps you stay focused on what's important to you. And yeah, I think it's just a function of, don't try and put on a show, because that won't last very long when you start having to debate issues. And to Julie's point, when you have to start researching facts and understand what you can and can't actually accomplish. So.
We have a question here. What are some of the best and worst things that you can spend your campaign money on? Is there certain things that you find that are more effective to use the money on, that they have more value? Why don't we start with Trevor on that one?
Yeah, I mean, so in my campaign, the most value I think in terms of cost was direct mail. So, I was able to reach most households and get my message in front of people. I got a lot of positive feedback from that. I'm not sure the signs were as valuable for me, just based on the nature of our community. And again, they can be quite expensive. So for me, it was the direct mail pieces, some of the collateral that, whether it was direct mail to people or whether you were, to Lisa's point, at a forum and handing it out, that there was something tangible that was left behind with your name, face, and your campaign that people could hang on to, and hopefully, if they're interested, dig into deeper and then take a look at. So for me, that was useful and a good use of resources.
Lance, what did you find most effective to spend your campaign dollars on?
Well, my most effective was not spending campaign dollars on email, reaching out to my inboxes on social media, various ways, Twitter accounts, and not being too intrusive, because a lot of people just say, just don't inbox because you're running a campaign, but also just sort of introducing yourself and then sending them an email of your platform if they want to discuss further. I know, of course, through the pandemic, I didn't think that signs were effective because really nobody was out and about like they would be normally. And also, again, strategizing your numbers. You have, you order like 50, 60 signs and you only put up 10. Well, that's a waste of campaign dollars. So again, I think it's just strategizing your whole campaign. But again, the format now, the electronic version, is and it's so quick now. It's just a heartbeat, and so I think it's really an effective way to me was the electronic or the technology without any paper or signs or whatever. Thanks.
Okay. Julie, your thoughts?
I've been through a number of campaigns. Social media, I mean, years ago wasn't really effective. It certainly is now. And again, I want to talk a little bit about demographics tonight. I'm not trying to just talk only about that, but it does make a difference. So things that I've done probably the most successfully are getting something to every single household that is in print. Trevor talked about that. And I hate to say it, but those signs that, we're a fairly large center, is all to do with either name recognition or, if you are recognized, a reminder about you. Also, some advertising, but this is where you can really succeed, or your money is not as well spent. So you have to really analyze this. So for example, in Medicine Hat, we have a daily newspaper. Is that worth it? Is the daily newspaper only read by a certain demographic? Does that demographic vote? Seniors tend to vote. They tend to read the newspaper. So find out where the largest demographic is and target some newspaper ads there where it's delivered. And the newspaper will give you their circulation statistics and so on. You may decide for a different form of money spent. I don't think that it's, again, look at radio. When do people listen? What do they listen to? Is it going to be worth it? Because these are big dollars and TV is really big. So you have to sort of figure that out. People have used other methods as well. But I find if you get a really good brochure printed, you can use it as a handout, you can use it door to door, you can use it at forums, you can use it just as you're talking to people about various things. You can then use that same one, just get enough to distribute door to door. And that seems to be fairly successful. It's not cheap, but it seems to be fairly successful.
Okay, thank you. We had somebody, first they wanted to thank the panel for sharing all your information. They're finding it very valuable. And they wanted to know if each of you could share what inspired each of you to run for council. Let's start with Lance.
Mine's more about lineage with traditional councils. I have a grandfather, Fred Tailfeathers. He was the last what they called the lifetime councilors. And then my father again sat around the council table. So I grew up in politics. And so that being said, a lot of people said, hey, I knew your dad or your grandfather. So that's when I lived and traveled the world, returned to Canada and to my community in 2000. And I thought, well, maybe it's a time to actually aspire, try to do that. I've done everything else. And I thought maybe there's some, some way I can actually have input back into the community. So that's all why I got involved, just family and the history of it. Thanks.
Okay, Julie?
Wow, yeah, I grew up in a smaller community in Alberta, a very, very community-involved, community-minded family, small family. And I really, my work has centered in community. That led me to be appointed, apply and be appointed to an advisory committee for the city, FCSS at the time. And then police commission after that. And so those things, there was a very heavy involvement with the city through both of those. And then at that time I thought, gee, I would really like to run for council, and I'm very honored to have been elected then. So that's kind of how it started. I've kept on and off most of those same involvements and had more. And yeah, I would just like to say to your listeners that it's like any job. It has its challenges and its rewards, but what other kind of an involvement or a job gives you the opportunity to learn so much, to do so many diverse things, to have a hand in decisions that shape the future? It doesn't occur anywhere else. So despite the fact that, like I say, 50% of the people hate you this week, and the other 50 who let you this week hate you next week, despite that, it really has a lot of rewards, and it's a real privilege.
And Trevor?
Yeah, I think for me, it was just, I've been in this community for 15 years, loved sort of the connectedness of the community and the experience of living here, raising my kids here. And at the time, 8 years ago when I ran for the first time, the community was struggling with, long-term financial sustainability, and how do we attract residents, and how do we navigate sort of the complexities that are impacting municipalities. And honestly, I mean, it sounds cliche. I wanted to contribute. I wanted to, provide. I thought I had some skills and a perspective that maybe we could do some projects, and so I just wanted to give back in a way, but also contribute. And at the end of the day, it's a great community. I wanted to see how I could make it better. And to Julie's point, it is truly a privilege and an honor to serve, and I am grateful for the opportunity. I've learned a ton about myself, and not all of it's been pleasant and not all of it's been painless, but it's an important journey. And I think the community is better off 8 years later, not just because of myself, but because of all the people that run for councils. And the two councils I've worked with have been very different, but all of those people add value and bring a perspective and ideas, and that's how we move forward and build stronger communities. So it's been a great ride.
Well, thank you all for sharing your stories there. We have another question here. Do you find it valuable to campaign your vision to constituents who may live in another district? Let's start with Julie again, and then we'll move on to Trevor and finally Lance.
I'm wondering, Jonathan, if the person who asked the question would clarify what they mean by district.
Jeffrey, if you wanted to maybe put in another question, just clarifying what you meant by district. And while you're doing that, we can just move on to another question really quickly, and then we'll go back to that one. We had a question here: is attending almost every community event, no matter what the cause or occasion, important in campaigning? And why don't we start with Julie there?
Okay, thank you. Well, I can tell you, in your campaigning, you get out to as many things as you possibly can. And if you've got more than one at the same time, then you pick the one, and sorry, this sounds so self-serving, but you pick the one where the most voters are. That just sounds awful, but it's true.
And Trevor?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if we're talking strictly in the campaign, it's about visibility. It's about quantity. So you hit as many things as you possibly can. I would say that, once you've been elected, 4 years is a long time. So I don't attend every event in the community. It's just not possible, balancing family and work and other things. So you have to be very, very clear on what you can focus on and what you can make happen. But during the campaign, it's a bit of a different game. You've got to be everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
Finally, Lance?
Yeah, community service, from my experience, again, is always being involved in the community anyway, because that's why you're when you want to be in leadership, is that you're trying to get a pulse of your community and how to move it forward with decision making or growing that community. And I remember about I ran, geez, it was 2012. There was a chief that did a workshop, and he said that he was elected almost seven, re-elected 7 times. And he said he just takes 15, 20 minutes to go to a special event, and then, to have that presence and to really be engaging. And I know, being on the other side of the coin, when I was younger, I knew that some of our politicians, you'd see them at events. And so that sort of gives you that there's a real, they're trying to connect with the community. So yeah, I think it's important, even through the course of your campaign and even after, once you get voted in, because I know the old joke there with the tribal council is that, oh, you guys just kind of come out every 4 years. Then in the next election, then we start seeing your face in public again. But I think it's just being consistent and really being meaningful and engaging, and to participate, sporting events and stuff like that. And if you get invited, do your best to attend, like high school graduations and stuff like that. Thanks.
Okay. And we've heard back from Jeffrey. He says that he lives in a rural county and they have councillors running in geographic divisions, and each of the councillors are voted on by the constituents within each division. So I think, not to put words in his mouth, but sort of sounds like a ward system to me. So do you think there'd be value in campaigning to these constituents that can't directly vote for you? And we'll start with Julie.
Oh, okay, thank you for that clarification. Near us, we have Cypress County, which is a fairly large county, and it is similar to a ward system. So within districts within the county, people can run to gain a position. So is there value? There certainly would be value in talking about things that would benefit the county or the district as a whole. You will want to talk to those in your own area that would be voting for you or not, about how you will stand up for their issues, how you will take them forward to the county council, how you'll go about identifying things on their behalf and those kinds of things, bringing value to them. But you also need to remember that once you're representing them as part of a whole, and once you sit at that table of the whole, which would be that county or district council, you then have a responsibility to govern on behalf of the entire county or district. So yes, there's absolutely a requirement to bring your constituents' ideas and things forward and take them back. But when you're at that table, you're voting for the better good of the whole district or the whole county.
Okay. Trevor, do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would agree. I think you have to take a whole community focus. And again, when you're elected, you are focused on everyone's concerns, whether they're directly in your area or not. But to build on an earlier point of Julie, during the campaign, which is inevitably never long enough to reach as many people as you want to, you will have to be very focused. And I think, you have to be a little bit tactical and think about your voters, the electorate that in your division that will actually get you elected needs to be your first priority. And other groups and broader audiences become a secondary consideration if you have time and resources to reach them. Just a practical consideration during, in Canada, what is usually a relatively short campaign.
Yeah. Lance, do you have any final thoughts there?
Yeah, we don't have wards. What we do is, like again, I mentioned a unique situation with the tribe because funding is based on enrollment. And so part of that enrollment is you have members who live in Calgary, who live in Lethbridge and surrounding communities. So to me, that's a sort of a off reserve and on reserve. And so when I campaigned, I made equal time to be on reserve campaigning, and also even took a couple trips to Calgary, did some forums in Lethbridge, because again, it's the big picture stuff, and to keep your eye on the prize there, because if you're aware of everything else that benefits the community, and then it's good to have sort of all those irons in the fire during your campaign. And they'll have influence too, different fractions of it.
Right. Okay. Moving on to our next question. We had somebody, do you have any tips or hints for fundraising for your campaign that you might be willing to share? Trevor?
Yeah, I'll come back to one of Lisa's points. Make sure you understand the rules and what's allowed and not allowed for fundraising. I think it's really important to stay within the guidelines. You don't want to be the subject of an investigation or potential fines. So be clear on what fundraising is allowed and from what sources. And then the second piece, I think, it's like an entrepreneur, it's like a startup. You're often talking to your friends and family first, people that know you and want to see you successful and want to see you in office. And then it builds from there. So leverage your networks, right? You think about all the people that you know, friends of friends, family of friends, and as your message spreads, I think a lot of that fundraising happens quite organically. But be very clear on the ask as well. So you have to be willing to make those asks that if you have people that you know would be willing to give, that you ask for a specific contribution, and that can be sometimes challenging if you haven't done that before.
Lance, your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's just getting small groups together, having little social mixers and saying about your campaign, and they decide they want to help out. And I think that's where it'll grow from there. And then if you start gathering steam, or you're getting more awareness out there, people will start to contribute or assist you in a way, even if it's volunteering, getting your posters up and helping your campaign.
And Julie?
Oh, yeah, fundraising is tough. Most of us do not like to ask people for money, but some people are really good at it. So if you can have a partner by your side, someone who's fundraising for you, or whatever you want to call them, to work with you, and to specifically ask people for donations or help or whatever, that really is a big bonus. I think you have to force yourself to ask, but in a respectful way, and it really helps if you have someone else who can do it, so that you don't really know yourself. It's even helpful, and I'm from a larger center, but it's helpful not to know who did and who didn't, in a way, because you don't want it to be personal, and you can know afterwards. That's fine. You have to disclose in any event, but yeah, those would be my tips. You can do some things like letters. Small events are a great idea. Little coffee parties, things like that. They're intimate, and then people get kind of motivated by it, and they tend to contribute a lot more than if you just ask them off the top. But yeah, those would be my comments. It's always the thing that challenges me probably the most. I didn't say that earlier, and I think people need to be prepared to know that whatever dollars you get are a gift. And the rest of them, you are going to have to budget to put in yourself, but have a budget. So, I mean, this could go on and on and on. You can spend a lot of money, because everything you see, you say, oh, that's great. I'd like to do that. Oh, I think I'll just order some more of these pamphlets or whatever. And pretty soon you've got this huge bill. And so you really need to have a budget, be on top of it, have someone to help you, and decide what you're going to do and stick to it.
I can imagine that it can add up very quickly.
Yeah.
Kevin asks, have you or anyone you know who's been elected used a crowdfunding site like GoFundMe for fundraising? Have you heard anything like that, Trevor? Or maybe
I personally have not, and I think there may be some challenges in the fact that you have to know who your contributors are, and there's certain qualifications. So maybe Paul and Lisa, it's section 147 of the Local Authorities Election Act, but I would, depending on the platform and where those contributions could come from, I think that could be very problematic.
I would caution against a GoFundMe because of the residency requirement. I would be very, very cautious.
Yeah, I think it is probably illegal. So.
Yeah. I would just say, like, as somebody who, often asks people for money for a variety of causes, I would just say, like, ask everybody. Like, people are just used to getting phone calls from me asking for money. During certain times of the year when my phone number comes up on their phone, they just answer the phone with how much. So, like, just get used to asking for money from people, because, like I said, you need about $5,000, and I would really encourage you to not use $5,000 of your own dollars. People will contribute, and people will often contribute $100 quite easily. Some people will contribute $500 and $1,000. So don't think that you're just going to have to do it all with $20 donations or bake sales.
we'll leave that question there then.
Well, can I give one more comment? I'm sorry. Just thought of
Yep, go
something
ahead,
else.
Julie. No.
There might be, there are usually a couple of collective bargaining units that, and maybe this doesn't affect the two of you, but it would in Lethbridge. There will be fire, police, but fire is far more politically active. There will probably be QP, and there may be others who contact the political, those who are running, maybe not all of them. They'll talk to them. They'll usually have a survey. Sometimes they'll want to meet you, and they'll decide if they are going to contribute to you and how much they are. My little tip here is be careful you don't owe anybody. It's great to take contributions, but if they're going to give you $1,000, make it absolutely clear to them that you are not taking that $1,000 in the spirit of supporting them in something they want or whatever. It has to be, it is not a personal thing. They're helping you with your campaign, but you do not owe them. There's no favor for the money.
Okay, thank you. Davey asks, he says that voter apathy is a serious concern here in Lethbridge and has been for many years. Now in a hopefully potentially post-COVID world, what strategies or advice do you have to sort of counter voter apathy? Lance, let's start with this one.
Yeah, I think it's just pounding the pavement and awareness, creating the awareness. Prior campaign 2012, a lot of kids got together. They wanted to raise the, because on the nation, it's you have to be the age of 21. And they wanted to lower to 18. So they were having these various awareness events and like music concerts. So I was very proactive with that. And also to this last campaign, a lot of times part of my campaign was, I don't care who you vote for, just get out and vote. It's really important that you know you participate in that. So I don't know, at the collective level, apathy, it's always going to be a challenge. I mean, even in you know our national political scene and even our neighbors to the south, it's just something you have to really engage and actually make aware that just get out and vote and participate in these campaigns that are about voting strictly, not so much supporting a candidate.
Julie, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's hard individually to combat voter apathy. It really helps if there's a strong mayoral race. It really helps if there's a controversial issue because people are piqued by that. I think Lance said it well. I've always focused on trying to encourage people to vote. I don't care who you vote for, but vote. You can do some things like targeting. You know, historically, people are not inclined to vote that much until they're, well, I don't know, late 20s, but probably early 30s. And I'm not saying no one votes then, but the majority of people don't. And so you might want to do some targeted things. I mean, get some youth, some younger people, some young family people involved in your campaign and get them to be talking to other people about voting and the benefits of voting and those kinds of things. You can target certain areas. And again, you can do that by asking your municipality for the statistics from the last election, because that's kind of helpful. But if that's an area of your city where you may not have a stronghold, it's probably not in your best interest to try to spend a lot of time there and not where your stronghold lies. As human beings, that this isn't really voter apathy, but it helps encourage voting. Our propensity is to, if we've been weak in an area, we're going to spend a lot of time there because we're going to convince those people that they like us, right? And tend to say, well, we don't ignore it, but we think, okay, we're strong here. We're going to concentrate where we're weak. And that is a mistake many have made, because if your stronghold is not there, very often you can't create it. And that means the voters aren't going to go out either.
Trevor, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what's been said. I think, you know, every candidate has a responsibility to try and engage people and get people out to vote and engage groups. I've been known, for example, when I'm, as a current elected official, when people have a robust discussion with me, I'll often hand them a nomination paper and say, perfect, I look forward to seeing you on the ballot in October. And it's partly in jest, but it's also to engage people in that conversation of, you know, I'm glad you're here, but, you know, there's other things we can do. So it's a challenge. It's a societal challenge. I mean, I think The results in Lethbridge for the last municipal election were less than 25% voter turnout. In my community, which is a smaller community where it's easier to engage people, it was still only 44%. So, still less than 50% turnout. These are challenging times, and that's not a whole lot different at provincial and federal elections. The percentages go up a little bit, but it's still not a majority by a long shot. So we have a structural challenge across our whole society in terms of getting people out to vote, but also engage in the process, unfortunately.
We have another question here. Somebody says, as they understand it, political action committees, PACs, are now allowed in municipal elections. Is this going to be a game changer going forward? Julie?
I don't know if it'll be a game changer, but those groups, depending on who and how strong they are, can help really help shape the public opinion around a policy direction. So make sure prepare the best you possibly can with all the information you can get, and again, be clear on your position, because a group like that can really sway the public thinking.
Okay. Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated to watch this fall's election and the role of some of these groups. I mean, there's large organized money on various ends of the political spectrum. So it'll be interesting to see how these groups mobilize and how it does influence the local level. I think from a candidate perspective, again, you need to be yourself. You need to stick to what's important to you and stick to your platform. At the end of the day, be prepared with a response. But it would be easy to try and adjust course to every PAC, every advertiser, every interest group that's out there. But that's, you can't do that. And I do think, I'm hopeful, I remain eternally optimistic that at the local level, voters will see through some of that, and that there's I hope a loyalty to the fact that municipal elections are relatively nonpartisan, and that people will hopefully discount and discard some of those fancy, slick advertising messages and focus on the core issues. But I've been accused of being an optimist, so we'll see. It'll be an interesting fall. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. Lance, do you have any final thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's understanding the dynamics of the committees, or what they're about, or what they believe, that the philosophy that they're pushing. Again, being on guard, doing your homework, the facts that you are willing to stand behind. And again, like as just Trevor mentioned, the voters in the end see through it all, and they know exactly what that looks like. Some of them can be influential, and that's why you have to step up to the plate and I guess debate your position, but based on facts again. That's all. Thanks.
Just a reminder to those viewing that we're just about out of time here. So if you have any final questions, make sure you get them into the Q&A right away here. Question we have here is, what kind of impact did running for office have on your personal life, and what kind of time commitment is there involved in holding office? Why don't we start with you, Trevor?
The time commitment is quite large. So although council meetings, for example, we meet twice a month for a couple of hours of each meeting. So there's always a couple of hours of prep, there's committees, there's various other engagements. As mayor, I have a number of regional forums that I interact with to represent our community. So, for me, it often can be 10 to 15 hours a week, which on top of a full-time job and other commitments can be significant. So people do need to go in with eyes wide open, I think. In obviously the larger centers, Lethbridge is officially, it's still considered a part-time job to be a councillor in Lethbridge. That's how the pay is structured. But many of them spend, 30 to 40 plus hours attending events and meetings. So, people have to be very clear that this is not a free ride. There is a serious commitment that's required. And in terms of relationship with the community, it will change things. I mean, there are going to be people that don't agree with you, and some people take decisions personally. And whether it's a quasi-judicial thing like a development permit or something that gets turned down, it's my autograph that's attached to that meeting minutes. So for whatever reason, people will sometimes make it personal, and there's nothing you can do about that. And my joke is that at any given time, there's probably a third of the community that loves me. There's a third of the community that doesn't love me. And then there's probably a third that doesn't even know my name. And so that there will always be those different pots. You will not be able to please everyone, but it does make it challenging that if you go to a community event or you have strong relationships in the community, some of those can and do change. And so that's sort of the cost of doing business, unfortunately, and you just need to be prepared for that. But fundamentally, it's, I think, made me love the community more. I think I've learned so many more things about members of my community, their needs, and what's required here, that I wouldn't trade, despite some of those pains, I wouldn't give that up. I wouldn't trade that experience.
Lance, your thoughts?
Yeah, the way the tribe is structured with Kainai is it's again going with the salary, the pay scale is that we're not allowed to hold other jobs, and so it's really 24/7. And my experience, it's you're always on call. I know a lot of our members want to take shortcuts or don't really understand process, and so they want to give you a call and hoping that you go in there and you sort of fix it for them. And again, being that respect and not taking it personal, you have to sort of say, well, wait a minute, there's a process here. So again, from that, I've learned through the course of each term that I did, or with each passing years, you start to understand time management and when to put the phone down, spend time with your family. But for the most part, then you have the pandemic that's happened. And in our case, it was the opioid crisis about 2 years ago. You don't know when you're gonna have these natural disasters or these things that just blow up. And that's what they don't tell you when you sign up for this. But again, you always have to be ready to be there and be available. So the short answer is it's every day, every waking moment you're on the clock. Thanks.
And Julie?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Calgary and Edmonton are the only municipalities where the councillors are considered full-time. So in the mid-sized cities like mine, like Lethbridge and others, it is a significant commitment. I often have equated it for myself at least as at least a half-time job, sometimes more than another half-time job. I work full-time. There's the odd retired person and some that, there's a variety, but if you do work full-time, I would encourage you, if you're running, to talk to your employer ahead of time and make sure that they know that there will be times you have to have available some flexibility in your workplace, and that a lot of the commitment, council meetings are a tiny fraction or a drop in the bucket of the kind of time commitment that you make with committees outside involvements. There's just a number of things you're appointed to, a number of responsibilities you hold, a tremendous amount of reading and research, and a lot of talking to the public, and that's your job, of course. So it's a huge commitment, a very rewarding one, though. And in terms of your family, this can be hard on a family because it is a lot of time. I would also suggest that if you're thinking of running, you're really serious about it, you talk to your partner, your family, however your structure looks for your family, and make sure they're on side. Because really, in the end, you're a team, aren't you? Whoever is there supporting you in your work and your outside involvements and your council involvements and so on is really a part of it in a way, because they're supporting you to be able to do that and imagining that you do that for them too. But it can be hard on family. And when there's a tough issue and people are mad at you or your position, sometimes your kids get it, your partner certainly does. And so that does affect some relationships. And you need to, it may not happen to you. I'm not trying to be a downer, but these are realities you need to understand when you're going into it, just so you have the whole picture and you say, yeah, I get it. I realize I'm prepared to make that commitment.
One thing if I can add, Jonathan, as a staffer to a politician, I'll say one of the things that we often overlook is that holidays are not ever holidays for a politician. So Canada Day is a working day. Remembrance Day is a working day, right? And so those things also have to be taken into account, that you will never have another Canada Day with, where you're sitting at home having a barbecue. You're going to everybody else's barbecue, I'm afraid, once you're elected.
Yeah.
Okay, this will probably be our last question for tonight, since we've almost run out of time here. Davey asks, They believe Lethbridge had about 30 people running for council in the last election. When you ran for your positions, how did you make yourself stand out from the crowd? Why don't we start with Lance this time? You're on mute.
Sorry.
sorry.
Again, it's just getting yourself out there. Sometimes you have to go the extra mile, or these little silly stunts that people like to have you participate in, showing you that you're a good sport. But I think standing out is just kind of going over and beyond, and just being a presence every day of your campaign, and sort of using a bit of wit, something whimsical, but also knowing that you're serious about what you're signing up for. So that's as far as I can share. Thanks.
Julie?
Oh, that's a good question. Speak with confidence. Talk about it as if you were going to be elected, not if you're going to be elected, but not cocky. Do not be cocky. So be confident, be self-aware, be prepared, be strong in your position. And I know this is going to sound funny. It won't appeal to men, but if you're a woman thinking about running particularly, and I shouldn't say this because but it's true. I've got a fashion background years ago, and the use of color and how you carry yourself with confidence and those kinds of things really make a big difference. Because the question was, how do you stand out? And I mean, everyone has gifts they bring. So you've got to take what gift you have, some of the gifts you are blessed with, and use them to your advantage.
And Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, Lance said it early on in this discussion around if you're already involved in the community, then if you're well known, that will be, of course, advantageous. And so in my case, I had been very outspoken on a particular issue prior to my first term. And so good or bad, I was well known for that. And so that sort of gained me some votes. And then, the second time around, again, based on the results that I accomplished in the first term. So if you're new to politics, if you're new to campaigning, hopefully up to this point, you've been very involved in the community and you're well known within your respective circles. And if not, start now. There's lots of things for you to do. And again, people want to see you engaged in your community. And chances are, if you're attending this forum and you're thinking about politics, you have been involved. You might not think about it, but whether it's the hockey association for your kids, or it's that community group that you were a part of, or that nonprofit that you volunteer on the board of, you likely have many involvements, and so build on those and make sure those are well known.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I know you all have busy lives, and I think this has been very helpful for everyone. We did have somebody who commented that this has been exceptional, extremely interesting, practical, and all three panelists, along with Paul and Lisa, were so good. And they wanted to thank you all for joining us. I just wanted to mention to everyone that a recording of this session will be available on the library's website and on our YouTube channel. And then I will turn things over to Bonnie for some final closing remarks.
Yeah, just thank you to everybody who are speakers, our Q&A panels. Thank you for the attendees for spending your last 2 hours with us. We want to make sure we're sharing information with everyone in the community. Thanks to Jonathan and Trevor, who did media interviews this week. Not my favorite thing to do, so thank you to them for speaking so well about the event tonight. And yeah, the recordings will be available. And I think someone asked for Paul's slides earlier, so if they, maybe Paul, you can send them to Jonathan, and Jonathan, you have the contact info from people signing up. And so we can share those out. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
And good night.